Welcome to the Life Success and Legacy Podcast. We're glad you're here, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Life Success Legacy Podcast. I'm Chris Bay, and I am joined by a fantastic human being, Steve Harmon. How are you, Steve?
Doing great. Thanks, Chris.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this. I'm really excited to have this conversation, and there are some clients out there that I wonder if they think about IBC more than I do, and I do it for a living, and you're one of those people.
That might be fair. Yeah.
I often say like Ron Swall is an example. I'm like, Ron, you need to get a hobby. And he says, this is my hobby, Chris.
Yes.
Or as Pay says, she's like, some people like to play Sudoku, but I like to do IBC or income stacking or whatever, right? So yeah. Well, welcome and thank you for taking some time to share your story about IBC and how you've used IBC. Just for some context, will you introduce yourself, your family, a little bit about you and where you live and what you do in life, so our listeners have some context?
Yeah. I'm out in Mapleton, Utah. Been here for about 2 years, but we've been in Utah for, going on 13, 14, I think. And grew up in Arizona. I have 4 kids, a wonderful wife I met in college. She keeps me on my toes. We like to say she's the one who's the doer and gets things done. Most of the tools in the garage are hers, not mine.
I remember you telling me that.
She's definitely the one
She did not marry you for your carpentry skills?
No, my parents taught me when I was young, like, hey, you need to learn how to do this, or you're going to have to make a lot of money to pay someone else to do it. They didn't give me option C, which was marry a wife who will do it herself. So
Yeah.
I think I won the lottery on that front.
You did for sure. That's awesome.
I'm also big, as you can tell, on goals. That's something that I'm very passionate about. And then, as you mentioned, on hobbies, love hobbies. So it's been one of my annual goals has been learn about a new hobby or do a hobby for the last couple of years. So I love, like you can see maybe on the back here, I've got a glass blown object. So I like glass blowing, stained glass, and I've lately been doing faux stained glasses, as you're probably aware.
Do you have your IBC stained glass nearby? Grab that real quick. I think our listeners would find that kind of interesting.
So
we clearly had this all planned out ahead of time.
Yeah, clearly. I leave this in the office window at home so that I don't forget it. I stare it out the window occasionally when I'm doing my work, and
so walk our listeners through partly the inspiration and then the meaning of the images and where this came from.
Yeah, inspiration of it was just I've been doing faux stained glass for a while, and I like to do things that I find meaningful. So I do a lot of landscape stuff or objects that are fun for my kids. My 5-year-old asked for a bubblegum dinosaur for his birthday, so we made a bubblegum dinosaur faux stained glass that's in his window. But for Nelson, I was thinking, hey, what about the 5 rules of IBC? And how could I visually remember those? And so you've got, think long term. Don't be afraid to capitalize with the tree and the treasure chest. Don't steal the peas. Don't do business with banks, and rethink your thinking.
Nice.
And so just thought it was a fun way for me to just remember things, and then also be something to thank Pay and Mike as well for Pay originally introducing me to the concept. So
yeah. So let's go there. How did you, give us kind of the pre-IBC, like what was your mindset about money? Where did you learn about money? And then how were you introduced to IBC? And was that a smooth transition for you, or was that challenging like it was for me?
Yeah. I learned about money as a kid from my parents. And I was a Boy Scout. So there was a personal finance merit badge I had to earn. And I remember having to track how much I spent each day at school lunch and where money went, where it didn't go. So I was always kind of taught like spend less than you make, the general concept. The second concept was like debt is bad.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk a ton about investments growing up or things of that nature, but I always knew like my dad was invested in 401ks and in stocks, and He paid a lot of attention to like Money Magazine and things of that nature. Uh, but the basic broad swath principles were, hey, credit cards can be a good use for you if you pay them off every month.
Yeah.
There's a points game there, but use it as a debit card and it's okay. If you use it otherwise, it's not going to feel good. So I just kind of followed those principles, and my grandparents were pretty frugal, and so that's kind of just been instilled in me. I mainly like don't spend as much. It's kind of my mentality. Like don't spend a
Hmm.
ton, and then if you are going to spend, you haven't spent, so you can spend a little bit more on that thing because you already were saving up money.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I started. Uh, Back in 2022, around August, I'm in technology sales, which means I have commission that comes in as well.
Hmm.
And we were looking at building a house. We were doing a variety of things, and I had a deal that I had been working that I knew was going to provide a decent amount of commission, but I was tired of spending it on worthwhile things and not, and essentially it being gone. Uh,
Yeah.
and so the thought process for me was, how can I get this commission to pay me again and again? That was kind of the question
Hmm.
that opened up this kind of whole new world to me. It started with reading a book that was a real estate book that led me to bigger pockets,
Hmm.
to like rent to retirement. Rent to retirement had some information on TARDIS there. It looked like a MLM to me, so I immediately discounted it. It was like, I'm not going that route.
Hmm.
But then when I talked to them, they pointed me back there. So I went and had a conversation about the income snowball method and income stacking. And that's what ended up leading me to like a kind of mastermind group in WhatsApp. And I met Pay there. And Pay was like beating this IBC drum. And I was kind of like, what is this? And when I looked at it, I saw whole life was involved, and I was like, I don't know. Like again, the only thing I knew was the buy term, invest the difference. Don't get whole life. It's a bad deal.
Yeah,
Uh,
me
so,
too.
so didn't know a lot about it.
Hmm.
I decided not to truly engage in that chat, just kind of read and consume initially. And then this was like December of 2022. I bought Mike Kwong's Dibs on Your Money book.
Mm.
I read it all on Christmas Day. So it was maybe like four
You
hours.
binged it.
I binged it. I was like, okay, okay, okay. And so then I read Becoming Your Own Banker on the flight back from Christmas break. I finished it on the airplane New Year's Day. Um, and I was like, how can this be possible? And why would
Right.
I have known this?
Mm.
And so immediately set up time with Mike for that first week in January to talk with him and then go to your boot camps.
Hmm.
And then I had kind of an example policy, right? And kind of what this could do within like 2 or 3 weeks of that. Now, that being said, I didn't pull the trigger then.
Yeah.
It's like, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is appealing in variety of levels, but I'm not sure I'm ready for the size yet or when to weave it into my overall financial approach.
Hmm.
And as I had mentioned to you previously, like I had actually met with, I have a really good buddy, also named Mike in life insurance,
Hmm.
that I play basketball with, and he introduced me to whole life and IULs and had talked to me about what my family would need from a death benefit coverage.
Yeah.
But the premiums to me was like, whoa, like that's a lot of money to commit to every year. I'm not sure this makes a lot of sense. And what your team provided me was half or a quarter of the premiums that he had been suggesting. But the biggest difference to me was there were life benefits while I'm alive that made sense to me beyond just the death benefit, which is obviously important for me and my family. But if all it is a death benefit, then I have a hard time understanding why I wouldn't do just the by term at that point. But what I realized with IBC and the ability to use my policies while I'm living when I need it, like that to me resonated a lot. And over the next probably 3 or 4 months, I just kind of loosely continued learning. I read the And Asset. I did like the Living Wealth free course. And I loved Nate Scott's Dollars and Nonsense podcast, and I kept listening to that. I stumbled on Chris Noggle and Money Multiplier on YouTube. So I was just going through and casually learning a little bit more. And I actually put together like a two-pager Google Doc for my friends, and I would
Mhm.
send them that like, hey, this is how I'm learning about this concept. You should probably take a look at this too. And I was like, if you like books, here's the books. If you like podcasts, here's the podcast. If you want to talk to someone, here's this person to talk to. And um, that's been pretty helpful for a lot of people. And so that to me has been a way for me to go about learning.
So you delayed, right? There was a period of delay, and you didn't pull the trigger right then. What was that about? What was that delay about?
Part of it was like,
Because I delayed too. I
yeah,
was 9 months delayed, so I'm not judging you. Like I'm in the same camp.
yep. I think the delay came down to, am I optimally using my money?
Hmm.
Was it the right time to start a policy, and where was I going to pull funds from to do
Yeah,
that? I
yeah.
had just started income stacking at the time, and my stack sizes weren't large enough to do the premiums that were suggested.
Hmm.
And so I would have needed to pull it from somewhere else, right? Either my emergency fund or my stock or something else. And I was like,
Hmm.
I don't know if that's the right time. One of the kind of triggering functions for me was my company was being purchased.
Hmm.
And I had been part of three exits with that company, but this one was going private again. So we had been on the stock exchange and we were about to like be taken private by a private equity company. And so I had learned from previous exits that if you get taken private, then all of the stock that gets vested is paid as income and is taxed as income.
Yeah.
And I was like, not doing that again. So I waited until about a month before the acquisition, and then I sold that stock so that I could lock in my stock or capital losses
Hmm.
for tax purposes. And I used those funds to jumpstart my IBC policies.
Gotcha. So we tell people IBC does basically four things, right? It eliminates outside debt. And I'll preface this. I'm curious for you to share with our listeners what was it that was most important to you of these four things. Um, so number one is eliminate outside debt, right? So credit cards, car loans, mortgages, business debt, things like that. Number two is build your warehouse of wealth, just building your capital that you can use it for anything you want. Number three, passive income, which you are already doing, income stacking. And then the fourth is the tax-free wealth transfer in the form of death benefit. Of those four, was there one or two that was a priority for you at that point when you started?
I think the passive income was probably still the largest, but I was really curious to understand the debt component. I didn't have credit card debt. My debt was solely in mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I was curious about is like we were literally in the process of building our home that we're in right now, and we were living in our other home, and I was debating on, do I keep this and rent it? Do
Mm-hmm.
I sell it? What do I go do? And so Mike was helping me kind of look at, hey, how long would it take, for instance, to pull that townhome mortgage into policies based off of a policy structure? And so that part was very curious to me. And then obviously, like I was very under covered or underinsured from
Okay.
a death benefit perspective, and that was
Mm-hmm.
becoming more and more critical to me based off of like, look, I've got four kids. I've got 10 to 2. Like the 2-year-old was like just getting born as we were looking at all of this, and so part of me was just like, hey, I need to be covered, but I also need to have another place to store money. How do I make this something that's beneficial for me and my next generation? That was the and component was a really big deal for me and how we were thinking about this.
Yeah. And I know just in knowing you and our conversations that we have that family piece is very important to you.
Yeah.
In fact, and looking at your goals behind you, you have blended your goal, your passion for goals, along with your family. And one of the things you shared with us in coaching was goals that you have for your family and kind of a vision and values and things like that. Are you comfortable talking a little bit about that with folks, like just to give them some context of how you think about things in terms of goals for your family, what you want to accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. About 3 years ago, I started doing around this time, started doing accountability partners and
Mm-hmm.
like very specific annual goals. And as I was doing that, and with the advent of AI, I was like, there's probably a way for me to get a lot more clear on the goals that I have. And so at the beginning of this year, I kind of played around with AI and had it pressure test some of my financial goals for not just this year, but for the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it poked a lot of holes in things.
Did it?
It probably took a couple of weeks of back and forth in this conversation because it was not like a, hey, I can just turn around that in a few minutes to think about. But one of the things that was an output for me is I came up with like some values in general of how I
Mm.
think about it. And one that stands out for me, well, two of them would be play long-term games with short-term urgency, and then invest 10% of my kind of investment funds, if you will, in experiences with my family, right? So how do I mitigate my current mindset desire to build capital, build investments, build wealth for my family in a way that allows us to not lose sight of why we're doing it? And that's really the reason behind of like, hey, how do I make sure that we're creating experiences? I'm not just taking on side hustles or investments and hobbies that take me away from my family, but that can contribute to my kids and how they engage with me, or helping my wife get to do things she wants to do. Maybe it's another saw or something like that.
Listening to you talk about that reminds me a concept in a book. I think it was in a book that I was reading where I heard this. But when you talk about like investing in experiences for your family, this idea is, we talk about investments and getting dividends. This concept was about experience or memory dividends, because as we build those memory dividends over our lifetime, at the end of our life, when we can't do a lot of the things we maybe did in our 30s or 40s or whatever, we still have those memory dividends. And if we just stack those on top of each other, just think how wealthy we will be in those memory dividends. And that's what it makes me think of in listening to you talk about that for your family.
Yeah, I love that. That's really the concept. I had a company that I previously worked for that had an experience bonus.
Mm-hmm.
The bonus was only able to be used if you had used it for an experience you could go do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's very aligned with how I think about it.
Yeah. Even our little business, Life Success and Legacy, every quarter we do a drawing, and it serves two purposes. But we do a drawing, and whoever's name is drawn has to go on a 10 to 14-day trip, and we write them a check to go use for that purpose.
Love
And
that.
one is we want people to get away, because we know when you get away from the daily grind, you actually are refreshed and more creative. And every single time people come back and they're like, I was thinking about something. So that's one purpose of it, is to say it is good to get away from it from time to time. The second purpose is that it helps us cross train and make sure we don't have any gaps in our system. So if one person is gone, because we're small, right? If you have one person gone, that could have a significant impact. And so we always make sure that we have cross trained if someone is going to be gone for 2 weeks, right? That we can cover that. So yeah, but back to the whole experience, reinforcing that experience piece is good.
Love it.
Um, so yeah, so you have some goals and some visions and things for your family. Has that always blended? Has that been an easy conversation between you and your handyman wife?
No, not always. Um, I think like there's like any couple, right? There are parts of natural interest and parts of forced interest. And I would say finances for my wife is a forced interest
Mhm,
area. It was a forced interest area for me, but has become a natural interest area uh,
mhm,
over time. And so I feel like there's a time and a season for a lot of things, right? And for me, that just for whatever reason, it now is that time that I'm most interested in this area, right? And I think that's natural for people in their 30s and 40s as they're starting to realize like, oh, like I've been in the career space for a while. I know what this looks like. Do I want to continue doing it the same way? Do I want to do it a different way? If I want to do it a different way, how do I do it a different way?
Hmm.
So those are all the questions that I've been asking. My wife's been like, "Hey, I want to make sure that she makes sure that our life is much more beautiful." We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I do certain elements of that, but she's so much better at thinking about how do we make sure life is enjoyable, differentiated, those types of things. And so
She brings the richness to it.
she brings the richness. That's a
She's
great,
the spice, right?
yes.
You could cook a meal and it
Yep.
could be okay, but when someone really knows how to use spices and textures and things, it makes it so much more enjoyable. It sounds like that's what your wife brings.
I can eat to live. That's
Yeah,
probably where I'm about.
yeah.
She makes eating enjoyable. And
Hmm.
so I think that part for me is how our kind of relationship works. And a lot of times I'm thinking through like the specifics of, okay, I need to earn this much, or I need to make this much, or we need to have this type of cash flow for us to go and do XYZ. But I don't always have the cool like XYZ. She helps me think through like, well, okay, like we can go do that, but I'd really love to do these things too. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like it'd be cool to go travel. Like we love travel. We don't do it enough.
Yeah.
So we've we did a date night where we just talked about travel places that we want to go to. And my mind put it in a spreadsheet. Her mind was like, we're just going to talk about it and we'll make it happen at some point. So
Every party has its pooper. That's why we invited you.
exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
I'm the same guy in our relationship. Sean's like, really? So you need to put that in a
You know,
spreadsheet or yeah, something like
yep.
that. Yeah,
Yep.
that's how I think. You're making me think of maybe the same book actually, but many of us have bucket lists. You know, like when you and your wife are talking about the places you'd want to travel and visit and explore and all that. There's a concept of time buckets, right? And so rather than just a bucket list of, oh, I want to hike the Grand Canyon or I want to travel to Portugal or, whatever those things are that people want to do, you actually put them in time buckets where it makes more sense. For example, my folks have gone on 2 5-month world cruises, which is amazing, fantastic, not bad for a UPS truck driver and a special ed para, right?
Fantastic.
But they have been able to do that. Well, you don't have to be super physically healthy or active to do it. They're in their mid 70s and they're very healthy, but you don't need to do a cruise in your 30s or your 40s. You can do that later on in life,
Got to
right?
go do Machu Picchu in the 30s and 40s.
Exactly. Like when I did the Grand Canyon, a buddy of mine, we went and did rim to rim to rim when we turned 50. And we underestimated the Grand Canyon and we overestimated our abilities. It would have been maybe better to put that on the list in our 30s or 40s. We did it, but it left some scars for sure.
But the
So
memory dividends haven't gone away yet. So
no, I've got the memory dividends from that, and it's fantastic. It's for sure a bucket list thing. But I like that idea of time buckets, and you can do that with your kids. We actually sat around the Thanksgiving table with my parents, and then us, and then my kids, and we called it. I got this idea of doing a dinner view, okay, where you have dinner and the younger generation interviews the older generation and they ask them questions like what would you have done differently, or what are the things that you had the best memories of, you're so glad that you did that. So that whole dinner view, the younger generation gets to learn from the older generation, and that was fantastic when we did that with my folks. um, and then we started doing the time buckets with our kids, and we talked about it with the older generation too, like what were those memories and how old were you when you did it. So we're kind of modeling or framing out for the younger generation like how to think about these things in life. And I think you can do that with your kids as well. And
yeah.
imagine like doing that with your folks,
Oh
having
yeah.
your kids asking your folks those kind of questions.
Yeah. I mean, be fun to do it with my folks. Be fun to do it with my mother-in-law. She's been to so many places based off of
Mm-hmm.
marrying into military and all of that. Like the types of experiences she's had, I don't think my kids fully grasp or understand yet. And I think that'd be a
Yeah.
fun thing to do with her and with them, so they can be like, well, if I'm thinking about places I want to go, grandma's been to a bunch of these.
Yeah.
Grandpa's been to a bunch of these. What does that look like? So
Very cool. Okay, so earlier you mentioned that the passive income was one of the things that was really, you were already doing your income snowball, income stacking, and all that, which we use those terms, income snowball, income stacking, interchangeably. Um, so when you use your IBC policy, you are looking at it as your line of credit, right?
ironically, that's the one thing I haven't done as much of is
You've used it for other things. So tell our listeners a little bit about how you have used your policy.
yeah. So I'm traditional IBC focus. I started doing self escrow on my mortgage, so property
Mm-hmm.
tax and home insurance. I just pay those annually and then pay that off through my policy and then pay it back through my own um, income streams. And then the
Mm-hmm.
second thing that I've done is like I did a publishing course. Please don't ask me where my book is. My wife will love you if you do though. Um, the second thing I did recently this year was epoxy in our garage. It was just a project that was like, hey, this came up. We got a special deal on it because I didn't need to do it right away, but
Mm-hmm.
they needed to fill their schedule and they knew I was interested. So I looked up on Google, what's the lower end of this range, and I said, hey, if you can do it at this price, then sure, we'll do it. And
Mm-hmm.
put it on their credit card, paid it off with IBC, paying it off of my own income streams that are coming in, right? Um, but when it comes to like income stacking, right about when I started IBC, the teriyaki concept kind of came into play. And for listeners who may not be aware of it, essentially, I figured out a way to leverage my policy to pay monthly income to me out of the policy. That is also because it's a cash value loan, tax free.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of my other income streams are not, right? They're not as heavily taxed because there's only a portion of interest in my principal and interest payments.
Yeah.
But this is a nice kind of chunk, and it ends up right now, I'm about 3 years in, about 40% of my monthly income that's coming through the income stacking is
Mm-hmm.
coming through my policies or my
Okay.
system of policies right now.
Yeah.
And then the last way I used it was Hard Knocks, School of Hard Knocks. I managed to disobey some of my own investing rules and ended up in an investment that turned out to be a Ponzi scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot of lessons from that in
Yeah.
particular, a lot of painful lessons, a lot of good lessons of how much it is that your spouse trusts you. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that was a pretty impactful moment for me, is having to bring up to my wife like, hey, we lost this much money. Um, she she didn't blame me. She immediately said, hey, that's us. We talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the lesson in IBC for me was I had taken a loan, which was one of my rules that I would not do. And when I think about it from this perspective, from a debt side of things, it was an amortized loan.
Yeah. So not from your policy, just to clarify, this
Correct.
was a loan from an amortized loan from like a bank or something else, right?
Yep, a private
Yeah.
lender
Yep.
bank.
Yep.
Um, it was high interest, higher than I would ever have previously agreed to, but
Mm-hmm.
the money had mapped out with how the investment had been paying up to that point. It only needed to work for about a quarter for the money to all kind of math out, and I could have paid off that loan and still made money.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the investment went south a month later. So I then got in the unenviable position of figuring out how do I get out of this loan that I now need to pay every month. It was about the size of my mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how do I do that in the least painful way without disrupting all of the work that I had done in income stacking or in my stock investing and all these other things that had been going on in my financial life.
Yeah.
And definitely felt like I got a lot more acquainted with Nelson's experience when he talks about at the beginning of becoming your own banker, like Well, it was a little bit of inspiration, and I realized I had the tools in front of me, and this is how life insurance can work. And I was definitely kicking myself. I was like, man, if my policies had just been capitalized enough and I had been able to pull this into my system, yes, it would have still hurt. But the flexibility that I would have had in terms of how I pay that down or how I pay it off would have been very different because cash value loans, you set as the policyholder, you set the payment schedule back.
Yeah.
And I could not do that with the outside bank.
Mhm.
I had at least been in the beneficial position of I did not have a prepayment penalty. But
Okay.
the thing that was really beneficial to me is I was able through some stock liquidation, my HELOC, and my IBC policies, was able to kind of do some gymnastics, pay off that loan, and then move the existing debt that was now on my HELOC into my IBC policies. And
And you know folks who couldn't get out of their loan.
I
They
do.
did the same thing you did, but they couldn't get out of that loan. So they were shackled with that ongoing payment that they had to make to an outside loan source. You were able to move that internally into your system.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Mike's book Dibs on Your Money was immensely beneficial as well. It's kind of the first time that I started picturing how this could work mechanically for me because he talks a lot about it being like a hole or a debt typically or a liability that you're buying. Now, obviously, I bought a pretty big liability in the
Yeah.
but didn't realize that's what it was. Wolf sheep's clothing. But I think what I realized from that is it gave me additional liquidity and flexibility. And that has been probably the number one thing I've now been seeking and searching in my financial life is I'm building control
Yeah.
and flexibility. I want the control and flexibility in my life to be able to do the things I want to do without causing angst or apprehension. Like I want it to be peaceful. And
Mhm.
so I'm seeing that more and more. And frankly, since I started IBC back in April of 23, I haven't stopped learning, as you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah.
It's been consuming, as my wife would probably attest to. I've gone 10 plus books now
Mhm.
across kind of different IBC practitioners. I've listened to over 1,200 podcast episodes across probably like 12 or 15 different podcasts about IBC. And while obviously there's a lot of similar content out there, it just helps ingrain it a little further each time. I've listened to every episode of Life, Success, and Legacy. I'm not sure I'm going to be willing to listen to myself. But beyond that, it's something that I really just thoroughly enjoy. And so I hope at some point one day to go to the think tank. Um,
Mhm.
it was something I considered doing the last 2 years. Just didn't make it work at that time, but definitely something that's on my radar bucket list to do. And yeah, it's been awesome to work with Life, Success, and Legacy and learn from you all. Love the go-giver mentality. You Chris introduced me to that book, and it's now on the annual reading list. And so
Yeah.
yeah, just
It's a good one. It's really interesting when you talked about your experience and then linking that to Nelson, and he talks about, the ideas of IBC came to him in the early mornings in the kneeling position. Like, what am I going to do? And but you linking your experience to Nelson's experience that he writes about in the book, I had not thought about it. And how powerful are those moments? Like, some of our most significant learning doesn't happen when things are easy and smooth. They happen in those moments of trials or tribulations, right?
yep,
Yeah.
those knee scrapes, those
Yeah.
failures, they're the ones that typically stick with us a lot longer. And it's a matter of like, what do you take away from it? And reality for me is I still don't know exactly what I'm taking away from that particular failure,
Mhm.
other than I did learn several things already, and hopefully that may help someone else in the
Yeah.
future that I come cross paths with.
Well, two things. One, thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that. And I know that was intentional on your part. You gave a lot of thought whether to share that publicly or not. So thank you for being willing to do that and to share with other people. And just for the record, I lost some money in that same Ponzi scheme. There's quite a few of us did. And so we all learned from that. One of the things that I think is really cool about you is you've talked about these rules, like investment rules. So you've used your line of credit, you've used policy, you used a variety of things, but you do work at passive income, and sometimes that involves outside investments. Can you just share, like, just generally, like, what are your kind of investment rules that you have tried to live by? And then also that you didn't follow in that case.
As we both noticed, the failures where we all learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
I would say, like, as I think about income stacking in particular, and how I am optimizing primarily for that, like, I look for short-term amortized assets. So I'm very much intentional. I want it to pay me within a month or so of making the investment. And I want it to pay consistently, ideally once a month, but I sometimes will be willing to stretch to once a quarter, depending on what we're looking at. Um, Collateral is becoming more of a rule than it used to be. And I think that's natural as you think about becoming your own banker. What do bankers typically do? They look for collateral, or what can they do to stack the deck in their favor as much as possible, when life happens. And so I'm looking at some of those things. I would say when I think about using a line of credit or using IBC to do investments, one of the biggest things is don't over index or overstretch yourself. And so for me, I really like the rule of it should be able to be paid off within 5 months or less. The 3 to 5 months is a sweet spot for me. It makes me feel a lot more comfortable. And then the real big thing for me is the type of debt, right? So a lot of people will immediately freak out about you're using a line of credit to do investments. And I would have been one of them. So I understand where that's coming from. The reality is, as you look at the type of interest that you are being charged on a line of credit versus in your mortgage with an amortized loan, if you're making payments monthly on that, or even weekly, depending on when your investments are coming in, there's a daily charge of simple interest that's coming on for your line of credit, if it's a HELOC or even IBC in that case. Whereas with your mortgage, while there is some of those same type of factors coming into play, the reality is it's amortized and spread out and put towards the beginning of your payments. I'd rather those payments be coming to me than me making them to someone else.
Yeah.
And so I like using leverage from that perspective, because if I do it in a controlled way that pays off in less than 5 months, that's something that I can, one, rinse and repeat more quickly. Two, it also takes a little bit of the sting out of some of these failed investments if I get into them. So rule number one, don't take that shiny personal loan or mortgage unless it's for something that is collateralized, like real estate, for instance, as rental. I think that's a very different side of things, but the rest of them, I would much rather be able to kind of rinse and repeat until I'm at a size that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good. So let's start to tie this up now. You have a young family. And have you thought about how you will introduce and teach them about money as they grow over time? Have you given much thought to that, to put you on the spot?
As you know, I've definitely thought about it. I don't feel like I've arrived yet in terms of if I fully want to do it, but things that are like top of mind for me first with my young kids is just teaching them the value of money. What does like money is a medium of exchange. If I make this decision and I buy this thing, I'm deciding not to do these other things.
Yeah.
Or I'm deciding to delay those other things. And so we have those conversations periodically with my kids, like, hey, I want to go get this ice cream at McDonald's. Okay, we can do that. But if we go do that, then we can't do this. Which one do you want to do more?
Yeah.
And so we have those trade-off conversations. I bought is it the Beaver Banker book, I think is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
We've read that twice, once with me, my 7-year-old and 2-year-old, and then I had my dad come over and read it to the grandkids as well. And so that's definitely an area where I'm like, hey, we're just teaching small principles. How does this work? I'm talking through like, hey, this is how banks operate. this is why they can be good in your life, and here's things that maybe you want to rethink about on what you want them to do. We've
Yeah.
had my oldest read the Tuttle Twins
Mm-hmm.
books, and so the Creature from Jekyll Island was a big one for him, and we had some conversations about that. So as they get older, there's definitely more and more things that are happening. But what I'm realizing first is like, hey, I want you to understand the value of money. I want you to understand what it is and what it's not. And I also want you to understand that like you shouldn't be too tied to it. So like we're pretty big on making sure that they give 10% of what they earn already in tithing for church,
Mm-hmm.
just so that they can like get used to that idea of money is here to do good things, and it's not necessarily just to do good things for you. And if you can think through some of those like core principles and foundation, I feel like IBC starts to be a more natural thing to talk about.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm reminded teaching that the value of money and making choices, you can do this or this. It makes me think of a book, Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin, old book, but and it was re-released. But there's an exercise in it where they actually have you figure out like your hourly. So the idea is that you're exchanging your life energy for money. And so if my hourly income is X, if I earn X amount of dollars for an hour of work and I go spend money on a fancy dinner, how many hours did I have to work for that dinner? And is it worth it? You
Yep.
know?
Yep.
And put in framed in that way, I'd have to think on that, like how to put that in terms for a child to understand. For this child, it totally makes sense. And I was like, I don't think I want to buy that because now I'm going to have to go work like 6 hours to pay for it, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. We've actually done some of that with our kids.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times what we'll do is we'll put it in context of what they already understand.
Mm-hmm.
So like yard work. We'll say,
Yes.
okay, it took you X amount of time in the yard to earn this money, and you want to go do this now,
Mm-hmm.
or you want to buy this. This is now 20, 50 hours in the yard. Is that something that's worth it to you? Like,
Yeah.
do we want to keep doing that? Or
Yeah.
do we want to also increase our earning potential by doing something different? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
again, there's a lot of different things that we can be thinking about, and I don't want to make it feel like, hey, it's always time for money because it doesn't always have to.
Right. Right.
But that's the simplest way to help my kids early on understand, and that's frankly the earliest path they're going to have to earning money is going to be trading time for money. So I want them to understand some of the basics, but not maybe miss the next level that's going to be there.
Yeah. You have become very active in the community, in the IBC world, in DIBS, etc. And through your learning, you, much like the whole community, we all share with each other. We're constantly learning. It's iron sharpens iron. And you are actually going to host a meetup. And I know Mike and Pay are going to travel out to see you. Tell us a little bit about how that came about, when it's going to be, and what you hope to provide for people.
Yeah. So as a lot of things seem to happen for me when it comes to IBC and income stacking, I'm following Pay's lead. Pay has a meetup she does right in Houston,
Mm-hmm.
and I really wanted to have a meetup here in Utah. So about a year and a half ago or so, we started doing a meetup. It was only three of us to start. And then it's expanded to about almost 8, 10 of us now that we meet on a monthly basis.
Mm-hmm.
And we just said, hey, like, wouldn't it be cool if we could get Mike and Pay to come out here and talk with us too? And so this has been in the works for at least probably 7 months now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and everyone is super excited to have them out here. It's going to be next Thursday, so I don't know when this will be released, but we're
Yeah.
excited about that element of getting to just talk together. That's what we do, is just talk through like what are we experiencing, what questions do we have when it comes to income stacking and IBC. Inevitably, I think we probably talk more than like 50% of the time about IBC, uh,
Mm-hmm.
as we're answering different questions and the layers that are going on within that. But all of us are pretty much doing income stacking on some level, and a few of us are just IBCers, and so we just want to make sure that we're having space for having a conversation on what we can be doing to further our goals and our family goals.
Yeah, that's fun. That'll be a great gathering. It'll be a lot of fun. The meetups are fantastic. They're really just the quality of people and the level of energy and excitement and support is really fantastic. So, all right, Steve, we're going to wrap this up. I could keep going and asking you more questions, which just means we have to do another podcast down the road, right?
Love it. Clearly, I'm going to be keeping on listening to a bunch of them. So
There we go.
we probably need to figure out how else I use my policies in the future. So
There we go. Thank you for joining us, Steve. Thanks for sharing your story and adding value to the community. We appreciate it very much. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on the Life Success Legacy podcast. Check out our website, lifesuccesslegacy.com. We have lots of resources there. We mentioned some books that have been written. Mike Kwong's book, Dibs on Your Money, is a very good, just kind of financial literacy book. He talks about, the type of loans, the nature of the loans. He talks about IBC. He talks about velocity banking. He talks about income stacking, dibs, etc. Great book. If you have not read Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, we highly encourage you to get a copy, whether it's from our website or from Amazon or wherever you get it. We actually had a client who found their first book at a used bookstore. Someone had found a Becoming Your Own Banker book at a used bookstore, which was interesting. But get yourself a book and read it, not just once, study it. It's rich. We kind of call it the Bible of Becoming Your Own Banker of IBC. So read it, invest your time in it, have some skin in the game. We look forward to you joining us in our next episode. Thanks for joining us. Take care, everyone.